Out today. I
From the
have,
clubhouse.
yeah, I have Ragamuffin mic'd in to speak, and so, what's up, Rag?
Yeah, that's fine. Hey, Bridget, thank you so much for all of this today. It's really wonderful. And I just wanted to, two things. One, it's funny how an old memory collective in your mind comes back into play at a later time, and you learn something you didn't learn at the previous moment. And what for me, it was like I used to be really into this punk band out of California area called the Groovy Ghoulies, and one of their albums, their first album actually, was called Adrenochrome. They had this character on the front of it, like kind of looked like an old Ed Roth car culture kind of Rat Fink type thing. And I always thought it had something to do with cars. And it wasn't until later on, through some of my awakening, that I realized what that actually is. And I go back and I look at that album and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, were they involved in that? Like, what the heck? And so that's interesting. And then I wanted to ask about the camera technology. You slightly touched on being able to see the mark of Cain. That is really fascinating to me because I wouldn't have thought that there's any type of device that could see something on a spiritual level like that. But that's really interesting, and I'd like to learn more about that. Yeah, I don't know what happened to the guy who was developing it. I saw a documentary on the mark of Cain when he started introducing it, and it was like all on YouTube. This was like, gosh, I want to say, I think I ran across it in like 5 years ago, and that they had developed an application. And so I don't, maybe you can go to the App Store and maybe you can find like something that says, Mark of Cain, photographing Mark of Cain, photo app for the Mark of Cain. Because I know that, and it was cheap at the time that they put the application out. It was super cheap. It was like $5.99 for it or something like that. But the guy, they had really researched it because the guy felt it was really important that people know who they're dealing with. And in shamanism, we just have a different kind of old ancient shamanism. We just have a different perspective. Whenever we're dealing with people who are complicated or emotional or dramatic, instead of saying, oh yeah, they probably are the carriers of the mark of Cain, we call them just the petty tyrants, and we try to stay away from them and avoid them, at all costs, because they, 10,000 years ago, they knew that they were draining your energy. It's this technology just sort of instantly makes me remember the whole They Live movie and the sunglass dealio, and so yeah, that's I think that's interesting.
Turns out I have that movie hit. Oops. I have that movie. Go ahead. Turns out I have.
This has been around for a long time. I mean, ancient shamans. If you go back and you read a lot of Carlo Castaneda's work, Don Juan, his teacher, and his entourage are always talking about how they hate this place because it's a terrible, terrible place. And, what goes on here, and that their ability to be able to take their bodies, because they don't even want to leave their bodies here, and be able to, go through the time continuum. And that's why I'm not really sure. Sometimes I think we're being spoon-fed propaganda with the New Age saying that, things are going to change and, the Cains are going to be removed, Cain bloodlines or whatever, or reptilians are going to be removed from the planet, blah, 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 this, blah, blah, that. And I just don't really see, I don't really see how that's going to happen. I mean, because all the companies in the world are probably the really successful ones are being run by these people. They're infiltrated. Maybe they'll get rid of some of the more. This is the other thing. How are you going to use law enforcement to capture some of these people? Because they have supernatural abilities and powers. I mean, they can kill. And like, I had this meeting. These women came to see me. I was doing some work with, sort of going to be doing some work for the Squamish in Canada, and they were moving forward with suing the Canadian government, getting their land back. They had 25 countries sign off on it, like, you know, a quarter of British Columbia, like, belonged to them, original treaties. And then they were going to have their own currency, which, you know, one Squamish dollar would have been equal to like $7 US. And, you know, they're still moving forward on a lot of stuff. But anyway, they had these two ladies come and visit me in Reno and have a conversation with them. And one of them was from the Bureau of International Settlement.
Ooh.
And then her counterpart was from, the inner part of the Pentagon. So, and she was saying, you know, at the Pentagon, there's like 3 different, you know, levels, right? There's like the outside, where pretty much everybody knows whatever, people can go in and out of that. Then the second level, which is, you know, more restricted than the third level, that's totally restricted. That the first level and the second level don't even know that the third level exists. And this woman had studied with a woman. This woman was doing the new budgets. She worked with the internal budgets, and they were really aware that they had to actually create new budgets and new money systems to actually fix the planet, because the planet is in really, 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 really bad shape. So that was her job. And she had worked with a woman who could explode people. She was an assassin. And they would send this woman out and to assassinate people. And all she had to do was get in certain proximity of the people, like even a block away, and then focus in on them, and she could explode them, you know, basically into nanoparticles. So, you know, you have people on the planet that can do that kind of stuff. Mostly, probably a lot of them are going to have some of these, you know, more extraterrestrial type, you know, abilities. They're not going to be easy to get rid of.
What?
You know, you're not going to just be like, you know, rounding them up and putting them in Guantanamo Bay, right?
So,
like Gitmo, you're not going to be able to just do that. That's not going to work.
whatever happened to the surface humanity that we used to live in, where everybody was just who they were and not a secret agent in some spy novel somewhere? They've taken us and made us
The white race
characters.
has never lived that way. We were genetically designed a short period ago. You know, like, it's totally true. Like, regardless if you like the whole creation or whatever biblical shit, but the white races right now on the planet, you know, they were created like 6,000-7,000 years ago from the Anunnaki in a petri dish.
How long ago do you think the planet was created?
What's that?
How long ago was the planet created?
Oh, I think like millions and millions of years ago, like as far as, you know, physical time frame that we...
And how long has the planet been inhabited by humanoid or some other type of species?
Well, I believe that the more indigenous people, you know, the browner people, have been here since the beginning, because they have oral history of being here since the beginning. The Aborigines believe that they're the oldest people on the planet, and they, I don't know, 40 years ago, ceased procreating a pure Aboriginal bloodline. And so a lot of their people were marrying off, you know, into other bloodlines that were lessening their bloodline, you know. But the Aborigines tried to reach out, have tried to fix the planet, have tried to give people understanding, and they basically decided that they weren't going to procreate in their pure race anymore, to pass down their abilities of telepathic abilities and all their understanding and physics and all this other stuff, because it wasn't worth it, that nobody on the planet was awake or aware enough, and so they started to exterminate themselves.
Wow.
So, yeah. So this is the thing, is like, here we have all this new age stuff that says, you know, we're going to extend, and all this stuff is good, and there's people behind. Who in the hell are the people behind the scenes that are, collecting all of these bad guys up? And who's determining who's a bad guy and who's not a bad guy? Don't you think that should be our right? I mean, as a population of the world, I mean, shouldn't there be transparency? I mean, like, why is all this stuff still hidden from us about what's going on and who has what? And I think, there is a power move. I think there's a big power move being played. And I think a lot of the planet is putting, the U.S. out of business, right? But what's going to stop the bad guys from going in and taking jobs and from, Russian companies or Chinese companies or some of these other companies in the world? Like, I'm not, I'm really, I guess, more on the negative side about the whole thing, because it doesn't really make sense to me, right? I mean, I see a power move, but, who's going to be in power after that? And why isn't any of this, being transparent? Like, why isn't it being a collective thing while it's happening? And for me, it makes it, really iffy, and that I have to really think about, just, teachings from my native teachers, and that they don't believe in ascension, right? They're the oldest people on the planet. They believe, like, however it is, it's their job to fix it, but they can't fix it. They were given all the information. They came here originally and contracted with all the other things that came here to the planet, as the initial startup. And then, after that, it just totally went haywire. And there's been constant extraterrestrial fighting over it. And you can go to the Vedas. Okay, so the Vedas are like a huge library of information, and people try to say that they're like 10,000 years old of oral history. I think that they're probably more like 400,000 year olds of history of, India and what they saw. But they talk a lot, I mean, a lot in these books, because I've had friends of mine who studied directly with gurus who had, doctorates, and they also studied the Vedas, and they talk a lot about the, number one, the Vimanas, which are the kind of the more metal UFO type ships. And then they also talk about the continents, floating continents. I mean, that wouldn't be any different than Avatar. But the thing is that would make them different is that none of these beings that would float in these continents overhead they were fighting each other for control over that land territory that they're floating over, right? And I was just reading something the other day about, it was the Anunnaki and somebody else, and, they were fighting each other overhead. But in the Vedas, it talks about, literally, like, it shocks me. I mean, thank God that the Vedas didn't get burned.
Yes.
I mean, because that's what Christians and Catholics did, was they went around the whole world and they burned libraries of information. Otherwise, we would know a lot more than we do.
Not under the control system.
So they talk about these two huge land continents, and this is eyewitness, people witnessed this, that it went into the historical, the Vedas, and they saw these two continents, that started going to war above their head and fought. I mean, we're talking fought for like months, these two different continents of different extraterrestrials. And so these were continents. So you wonder, was it like a planet like the moon? Because they know that the moon is not real. They know that the moon was probably brought in to the orbit where it's at. They know that the moon is hollow, right? These are just some of the things that have come out. And so is the moon like a bigger landmass or continent. I mean, where there's smaller ones, but the way that they explained it in continent is that, it floated, it looked like the land below, probably had some trees, buildings, houses on it, were huge. And they would lob weapons, bombs and stuff at each other and fight. And then there was a moment where there was this peak in this one fight between the two continents. And the one continent shot these certain weapons at the other one, and they said that it liquefied it. Liquid fire rained down. Like, it totally consumed that continent, and it turned it into liquid fire, and the liquid fire came down on the earth. And in that area, that's where the stone has been turned to glass. And even there are scientists out of the box that say the only way that the stone could have been turned into glass in those areas is by nuclear warfare.
Yep.
However, who had nuclear weapons 400,000 years ago, right? And so the Vedas, and this is the thing that we're taught. We're taught that oral history, folk stories, the Vedas, we're told that all this stuff is mythological, right? That it's myth, right? That it's not fact. When we know that the native people, the stories that they've passed down, they have petroglyphs, right? They have hydroglyphs, on sacred rocks that tell the original stories from the original people that lived them. So that's, even in acupuncture and medicine, Western medicine tries to poo-poo Chinese medicine, but, it's over 30,000 years old. I mean, they can find, these bones that they used originally to put in. They use handcrafted, bone needles to do acupuncture on the body. There's 5,000 years of documentation of acupuncture, right? I mean, documented for 5,000 years of what acupuncture can do and how it can be used.
Well, the whole thing about Western medicine is that it was bought and paid for by Rockefellers and Rothschilds and the robber barons and shoved in over everything else. So
yeah, but the big criminal here in a lot of this is medicine and doctors, above cops, above judges, above any other bad guy, industrial, petrochemical. Doctors are the biggest criminals in the whole thing, because medicine is the one thing that holds their whole thing together, because the doctors lie about everything. They lie about the vaccines. They lie about all the chemicals in our environment. They lie about beer. They lie about nutrition. They are the brokers of us as commodity of, herd animals to the system, so that anything can be done with us. And I think that people have to really start seeing this, and stop having their babies in hospitals, stop having their babies registered, because obviously doctors they get paid far too well. Even if they don't work, they still get paid well. So there's no way that obviously doctors are going to step out of the box and do the right thing. It's one of the reasons I stopped heading down the track of doing Western medicine and decided to go back and do the work, my family, my bloodlines, because I could see that I was going to be dehumanized at the points in medicine that I was hitting. And I didn't want to lose being human and feeling human and a lot of these other things. I didn't really think it would benefit people, and it doesn't. But so the real criminals in all of this whole game have to do with the medical systems, because they are the liars. They're the ones that are supposedly the experts. And they don't want to lose the money they make or their careers or, really look into anything, and they toe the line. They toe the line across the board. If doctors were doing the right thing, They wouldn't register us, right? They wouldn't play that brokerage. So doctors are no different than like a real estate agent. The real estate agent does all the criminal work for the banks. So they do all the contract signing. They do the contracts between the person and the banks. So people could say, oh, well, you know, my loan is a fraudulent loan because, you know, banks are not allowed to loan money, blah, 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 which is true. But the fact that the bank wasn't involved with you signing the loan, and they had this person called the real estate agent, which was the broker of the deal, it makes the real estate agent liable, right? Because they're doing the evil work of the bank, and they don't even know it. They get paid, so they don't even really think about it.
Right.
Well, doctors are the same thing. Doctors are the brokers between us and the government and us as commodities, and those contracts that start with the birth certificate document. So as soon as the parents sign the birth certificate, you know, our fate is sealed as basically cattle that can be used to anything to happen to, you know. So how do you shut down if things aren't really going to change and there's going to be, you know, a global reset and all this other stuff? I mean, how do you change the whole medical system overnight? Who do you replace as doctors and nurses?
Yourself.
How do you change the whole government systems overnight?
Yourself.
How do you change all of the business, the farms? I mean, how do you change all this stuff like literally overnight?
And
all of it is bad, and it's all super flawed. And I think people really kind of need to stop waiting around for other people to like figure out what life is going to be like once we supposedly have this reset, and start acting
as though we had the reset. Yes.
And doing it now.
And quit telling other people how to do it and walk your own way and just do your own thing. And if everybody did their own thing, we'd come to agreements really quickly because we're trying to get things done. You got it. No, it's...
Yeah, that's why I'm big about, you know, farming and microbial mass and large scale, you know, land restoration. Because for me, like, we can't have health. We can't have environment. We can't have an alkaline planet. We can't have clean water. We can't have clean air if we don't have clean soil that has large-scale microbial mass in it. I mean, it all boils down to that one thing, soil. And so for me, like, as far as healthcare, you know, moving out of 15 years ago, I mean, I'm still in healthcare, but I moved quite a bit out, went back.
We lost you.
Restoration. Are you there?
I'm here. I lost you briefly.
Oh, okay.
I have you now.
Okay.
Anyway,
it's the soil, you know. Hey, I need to grab another cup of coffee. So
yes.
Can you give me 2 minutes?
I was going to say, give me a couple of minutes to do a station ID. This is The New Way on Steampunk Radio. My guest is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, Consciousness of Economics and the Urban Farm Project. I'm Dr. Lenny Thyme. I am your host of the show, and we are talking now about some areas that we really need to consider from human scale. On human scale, the form is that every human is responsible for themselves as a sovereign being who is the person they are. You don't have to represent yourself. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to have letters after your name. But you have to have your own personal respect to be able to carry yourself with other people and behave in a manner that other people can interact with you. But we keep getting told that we have to all come together and all think the same way as group, And the best way I can see to doing that is by starting with everybody thinking individually as group of one, and then being part of the whole, which we'll call group of the whole. And as you show up on a daily basis, you become part of the regular group of the whole and have privileges that act in a sovereign manner for the benefit of everyone. So we create this artificial reality where we are all sovereigns responsible for ourselves, and then we sort the reality and see what we have based on who can do what in which capacity, and then bring that back as characters in our role play and use the crypto fiction to create a potential reality that can allow us to escape from the time loop that is Groundhog's Day. And this Groundhog's Day stuff has been happening where it changes, but it doesn't morph because the field, we're pushing the edge of the morphic field. And SMQAI yesterday was talking about a blank out place and that, and it got me to thinking there are definitely still three realities of people on the earth that are different subsets of the way they think. And Bridgette and I share a common reality in the living earth concept. And I totally agree with the idea of microbial soil and an acidifying, an alkali planet has to do a lot with oxidation and reduction. And I'm going to do some work in the chemistry area and create a form that can teach chemistry as an underlying way of looking at things, but I'm going to do it without most people understanding what they're learning is chemistry, because I don't like the way it's approached in school through physics and math, because it biases how people think about things. But before I really teach chemistry, I have to get to the fundamentals and see what's true and what's not true, and I now have some outside perspectives on how to deal with chemistry at the chemistry level based on human sociology from the experiment in sociochemistry that was the 64-day period called the New Way radio programming, or the Way New radio programming. Because the New Way is the radio show. Way New radio programming allowed us to call it WKRP and model it after the radio show in Cincinnati. The new model has not been established yet, and in fact, I think I'm going to go without a model for a while because I've got some technical work to do on the mechanism, and creating new models isn't going to benefit me as much as allowing the old models that exist to develop in better capacity. So I'm going to renew the show for 64 more episodes, which will take us to the summer solstice. So happy equinox, everybody. That's our present. Bridgette, welcome back.
Yeah, so I want to, okay, let's just talk about this for a bit. So I've been like trying to figure out, I think if I had grown up in any other under different conditions, I probably would have gotten, an official PhD from a university.
Right.
And I think early on I would have, dropped medicine no matter what. But I think that I would have really thrived in like sociology. And that's kind of like one of the main things that I study, like I do online healthcare with people and animals, and also a lot of shamanism work. And it hasn't been until recently trying to figure out what kind of happened to people. Like what was the big common denominator within, the generations that kind of surround me? And what was the effect of it? And why can't people straighten themselves out and move forward? And why are so many people waiting for something to happen? Waiting for something to happen in their life, a sign, a miracle, or, just handed a silver spoon or, money or whatever else it is. Why is it that people don't have the capability to really create their own reality? That they think that they can sit at home in their house and, conjure some kind of reality, and that, the perfect life based on fantasy and fairy tales, is going to actually find them. And if they don't fit into that fantasy and fairy tale realm, that they just automatically assume that, they're not going to have that kind of a life. So they've just, given up on some level just to do nothing and not. So one of the most important components is that dealing with the brain, like I do a lot of work on the brain and people's brain and how it works, is that we're so left brain lateralized in the reptilian state. So even if we aren't kings, even if we're more human, we're living in environments and training and programming that force us into the left hemisphere. In the left hemisphere, you don't have a brain, you have brains, two brains. You have a left and a right hemisphere. The only thing that connects them is where they connect into the plug-in or the cord at the base of your spine. If you took them out of a dead person, they would just flop open and be separated. And the only way that they communicate back and forth is through electrical charges, right? Those are the bridges between. But if you've been controlled and manipulated into competitiveness, domination, just thought control, like even, school and education, writing cursive, learning the English language, learning words, learning how to stay in your seat for, 8 hours a day and given your, OSHA breaks, right? So you're being trained to be a labor commodity in the education systems. And so everything around you is training you to be a left hemisphere lateralized person, which is running acid state, which is inflammation, which is where all disease comes from. It also, left hemisphere deals with the past and the future. There's no in-between. And if there is no in-between, there is no present moment. There's no way to spontaneously heal. There's no God in the equation. There is no you as a higher being in the equation. You need to be, in the present moment in order for that to happen. And so, people living paycheck to paycheck, debt, all these things that people are trained to do, which is to be in conflict with their life to fit into this fantasy fiction mold, is creating their demise and their early death, and also keeping them in enslavement as a commodity. So the right hemisphere, this is the deal. People will say, well, I'm an artist. I write with my left hand. That doesn't make you right-brained. Right brain is like a whole other deal. People learn how to do art because it's a technical thing, which would be the left hemisphere. Details, left hemisphere. Right hemisphere is not even really kind of in this world. It's those moments where it's probably close to like the DMT, like you can go and see DMT, the something molecule, and look at that. That's like a right hemisphere God in the present moment type of expansion, which is rare and far between. There are native cultures that use plant medicines such as DMT and ayahuasca and peyote, which we call the dreaming medicines, because that's what the right brain does. It's a traveler, but not of this world, right? And in order to harness it, it also has to have grounding. You have to have, in order to be human and be in an alpha state, you have to be an alpha brainwave pattern. You have to be whole brain. You have to have the left and the right hemisphere operating simultaneously together. So what does that look like? It looks like on a 24-hour, schedule, when you're in your night dream, being able to use your left hemisphere to control the night dream, to, not be cast all over in your dreaming world, but to be able to, create a path for it, to stay aware and coherent in that dreaming world, to be paying attention and thinking while you're in there. And then when you come out, being able to use that right brain in this technical program world, right, to help navigate it. So, when you're in your sleeping dream, I can fly, you have to bring a little bit of that I can fly into your daydream. And so in shamanism, parts of shamanism, it's about using both sides of your brain to operate both systems that you're engaged in. And in order to live a 24/7 life where you're like fully conscious and what we would call operating in the fourth attention. Now, the collective thing that I've seen, and I pinpoint it all back to the moment JFK was murdered. Because there was a huge amount of the American population.
Oh, wait. I pinned it back to when Isaac Newton made the decision to settle the dispute between the Pope and the King by taking consciousness out of science. But JFK's assassination is really important in the story. So I'll tell you the story later on, not on the show, the long-term story, but tell us from JFK. When JFK got shot, 5-year-old Lenny was sitting in front of the television set watching it. That's when I woke up.
Well, this is the thing, is there were all these people because, JFK was going to do disclosure about the aliens. JFK was going to return the money back to the people, the greenbacks, right? Which is what's supposed to be happening right now, is that the money and the gold and everything's returning back to the people worldwide, right? So there was all these people had all this belief, in JFK because he wasn't bowing down to his principles, and he reached across the aisle with the other cultural communities the best that he could, trying to figure out what would be best for the whole. And so when he died, I came after the JFK assassination. When he died, you can talk to people who were alive during that time period, and everybody, even people I know in Canada, knew where they were when they heard JFK was assassinated and that he was murdered. That was the moment that people went fully asleep. It's when, the revolution and all these other things in America and people kind of working together more collectively, and just a lot of things happened that came to a close. And then the baby boomers moved on and became the attorneys and the doctors and the controllers of this world for money, and went to sleep and stopped caring, So it was like this moment where when JFK was assassinated, it killed Americans, it killed them psychologically, and they gave up. And what happened from that point on, that was like kind of the final blow, I think, in America. And the Stockholm syndrome really applies. And I was listening to somebody the other day, like a couple weeks ago, talking about the Stockholm syndrome. And, I kind of I've known it from before, but I really realized, this is what's happened to people, is that, the Stockholm syndrome, and you go look it up, but basically, you you start to side with your captors. You know, the people that have enslaved you, destroyed you, abused you. You go to sleep, and then you side and you defend with the captors, right? And so it's almost like when I was a kid and I used to have to go to the church when my grandmother was a prophet, they stopped sending me to the little kids, you know, one, because my whole idea about what they were presenting as Jesus was like totally effed up. And so my grandmother would have to keep me out of, because I was really smart, you know, I was not like people in this world. So my grandmother would have to keep me out of, you know, little kids Sunday school because I was pretty confrontational. And the whole deal is like how I saw Jesus even as a little kid was, here's this white guy, you know, on a cross who's been beaten and whipped and nailed to something. And to me, what it was is, hey, white people, this was like, you know, from when I was a little kid, was like a threat. Like, hey, white people, you think you're in control? Hey, white people, you think that you can, you know, do whatever you want? Well, look what we did to your Jesus, right? We tortured him. We did like the worst possible things to him. And his pain and suffering was so intense. And he's white on that cross. And this is what we'll do to you, you know? So to me, early on, it was like the whole Jesus being white and on this cross was more of a threat to white people. That you better stay in line, because if you're relying on this person to save you, well, look what we did to him. So what do you think is going to happen to you, right? So I think that all this has always been kind of like in the psychology and also part of the Stockholm Syndrome. Like, even though people want to believe that somebody's coming to save us, you know, Jesus is coming, the ETs are coming, the Galactic Federation, or we're just going to ascend or whatever else. You know, we don't even have the intelligence enough to fix our planet and to operate individually and collectively towards a goal of a real takeover and a fixing of the planet. There is no one that is going, or thing that is going to take us away, that's going to want us somewhere else when we've been involved with the destruction of a whole planet. And so we have the Stockholm Syndrome where we may not, you know, we may be trying to get out of the box, but we're still shell-shocked, culturally shell-shocked, and we don't know what to do, and we're either defying the system, but we're not, because we don't really fully stand up against it. We just kind of hide out away from it, try to, you know, not bump up in against it, but not really doing anything.
I have an idea.
I think that what people need to do is, and this is what happens when I work with people online, because people can't heal from the disease. I mean, obviously you need lots of components to heal from cancer or whatever else, but the main component is a future. You have to be able to be in the present moment and see a future. And so I'll ask people like a basic concept that sometimes they have to work on for years.
Okay.
Which is, what do you think would make you happy? I mean, what would you like to do with your life? What do you see yourself doing that you think, you know, would contribute but also make yourself happy? And most people have no idea. I mean, you just ask them the simple word, like, what do you think would make you happy? And they can't even figure that out. They don't even know, because they haven't really had any experiences of happiness. So the thing is like, if we can't figure out in the present moment what we want to do collectively to make this place better, what we think that would actually make us happy. And this is not something like I get married and I have kids and I have, you know, 0.25 children and a house and a white picket fence.
I'm happy.
Something else. You need something else from the outside to make you happy. And that's not the same thing. You know, what could make you happy? So one of the things that I see a lot too is like then on over 27